All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. We actually have a number of people who have signed up to stream the program, so we want to make sure that they know that we're here and get started. So welcome. Thank you for coming to our last ACAP program for 2023. We're glad to have you. Tonight, you're going to be hearing about having those difficult discussions with parents around aging-related issues. I think I've met most of you, but my name is Dorothy Griffin, and I have the pleasure of working with the leadership team of ACAP Cape Fear. We brought it to our area in about September, I think it was, of last year. So we've been going for a little more than a year. And for those of you that aren't familiar, ACAP Community is a nonprofit, and we have chapters in North Carolina, Georgia, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. And the mission of ACAP, or Adult Children with Aging Parents, is to provide information, resources, support, and community through monthly programs like these at each of those locations, through podcasts and other resources. So what you should expect is Attorney Gansman will be sharing with us some tips about having those discussions. She'll be available for answering your questions. It may be a little bit briefer tonight because we were supposed to have her partner in crime, Sue Fritt, here as well, and she's not able to join us. So if you have questions, you have an attorney and a chance to ask them. So take advantage of that. I think those are the main things. We try to wrap up by 7:30, but I think we'll probably be out a little bit earlier than that. I think you all know where the restrooms are, but down the hall and on your right once you pass the main desk. And I think that's most of what's on my list. If you are on our streaming audience, feel free to ask questions, and those will be shared with our speaker as well. So I have the pleasure of introducing Attorney Kara Gansman. She's an elder law attorney and partner in the Wilmington office of Cranfield Sumner. She devotes her entire practice to elder law. So this isn't just one part of what she does, it's her whole practice. And she also serves as the firm's chair of the Elder Law Practice Group. And what that means is she works with families and seniors in southeastern North Carolina, providing just practical, pragmatic solutions to their legal needs. She also provides advocacy in the courtroom and counseling and helps her clients achieve their goals for long-term care planning, eligibility for long-term care benefits, asset protection, and peace of mind. And then she also works with other experienced professionals who offer additional care in matters ranging from estate planning, guardianships, probate, and placement in long-term care settings. So you can think of those are the different categories for your questions tonight. Sue Fritt works along with her at Cranfield Sumner, and she is a certified senior advisor and has been serving seniors and families in our area for over 20 years. And she's played a big role in helping to connect them to resources and is also full of knowledge from all that time in the industry. So please join me and welcome Kara. And watch yourself right there.
Thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Kara Gansman. Thank you all at home for joining us. I'm an elder law attorney. My firm is the Cranfield Sumner firm. We are statewide, both here in Wilmington. We have a satellite office in Charlotte. We have an office in Charlotte and Raleigh. My practice is exclusively elder law with estate planning and estate administration. And I am sad that my colleague Sue Fritt cannot join us tonight. We were going to take this topic today, having difficult conversations with your loved ones about aging. And so we were sharing this conversation and this topic. I'm prepared to speak. I don't think I'm prepared to speak for the entire hour and a half. I welcome questions, and quite honestly, I want this to be an informative event for you where you are getting information out of this. If you come with questions, I welcome those, and I think that makes this a bigger event for you, that you're going to get more information out of this if we're gearing the topics and the discussion towards the questions you have. For those at home, I believe you can log in your question and those can be asked, and I'll make sure everyone can hear that as well. So I really want this to be a fun meeting tonight. What we're tackling is difficult conversations with those that you love. And that's what we experience a lot of times at the holidays. I know that my office between Thanksgiving and New Year's gets a flurry of phone calls. And these are from panicked people who are visiting their loved ones for the first time in a year. And they have just had the experience of seeing someone they love, whether that's a sibling or whether that's a parent, realizing that things are different than the last time they saw them. Maybe mobility issues are more difficult. Maybe they're realizing that this person isn't staying on track of their medications. Maybe they realize someone's forgetting things more. Maybe that they're realizing that their parents have new friends in their lives who seem very opportunistic. And so these are all the kinds of phone calls that we get from worried parent or worried children who are caring for parents or could be caring for parents or their own siblings even. And so these are the worries that people have. How do I now have this conversation with my loved one about making sure that their needs are met, making sure that they're safe and protected? And so thinking about health needs, thinking about legal needs, and thinking about some of these other concerns that you all might be experiencing with your own loved ones. These are all the kinds of things we'll talk about tonight. And so broaching these conversations is never as easy as, hey, Mom and Dad, I just wanted to find out how things are going with you. How's your legal plan? How's your health? Because for folks in this room, I know from my own experience working with clients, your parents, if those are the people that you're working with or the people that you might be providing care for, they're going to say, what are you talking about? Or that's none of your business. Or, oh, it's fine. And meanwhile, I see a lot of married couples who kind of play in denial a little bit and hide each other's flaws from their kids because you're still the kids these days and they don't want you to worry about them. So those kinds of conversations aren't nearly as easy as they could be. And in some families, maybe they are just that easy where someone's able to say, hey, Mom, I'm worried about this. Or, hey, Dad, I've noticed X, Y, and Z. Can we talk about that? And wouldn't it be nice if we could have those open and honest conversations? But they're difficult because I think if you are pointing something out to someone, it's pointing that out to them that it's obvious to you. And maybe they're aware of it already. Maybe they're not aware of it and they're embarrassed. But just it opens up a little bit of emotional concern for them that maybe they're not quite the way they used to be. And I think it helps people face the eventual mortality issues. And so there's a lot of emotion attached to some of these conversations that I think we're aware of, and I think they are also aware of too. So the better ways to kind of open these conversations up. There is no right or wrong way. Well, there may be a couple wrong ways. But a lot of the many right ways will depend on the people that are in the circumstances. Maybe you've got siblings who are in the same position as you to speak with your folks. Maybe there are people in their religious community who they respect, who they might listen to. So I think the first step is enlisting help, finding the people that you think may have the same experiences that you've witnessed. Maybe your siblings have also said, gosh, Mom sure is forgetting things a lot. Or, the last time I went to see them, they had a pot burning on the stove. And so kind of sharing your thoughts. And some people might say, oh, that's talking about them behind their back. But I think it's just kind of gathering some facts from other people. What is your experience? Have you noticed this? And they may say, no, that's normal. Or they may say, gosh, I've noticed that too. So starting to draw from that community and find out, have other people noticed the same things that you're noticing? Having those conversations with those same people and then making a plan. Sometimes that plan could be as simple as choosing to spend a little more time with your loved one. Hey, let's take Mom out for coffee. Let's see if we can talk to her a little more. And let's find out if she's aware of some of these issues. Other times it's going to be a little more difficult. That's going to be when someone is maybe in a little bit of denial. And so that's when having that help from maybe siblings, maybe close friends or neighbors, maybe the pastor or someone in your community to help guide that kind of conversation. What level of outsiders you bring to that scenario depends a lot on the personalities involved. But I think starting to broaden that circle of people who are trusted by your loved one, your parents maybe, and bringing them to a place where they're feeling comfortable to have these conversations. I will say, don't have these conversations around the Thanksgiving dinner table. That falls right in line with politics or religion or any of the other taboo topics. I would say do it in a setting where everyone's comfortable. No one's going to feel pressured by time constraints, or that there's not a lot of noise or busyness, but you can focus quietly on the conversation at hand. And just have the people present who may need to be part of that conversation. And then the topic of that conversation is really going to vary. If these are health concerns, that's something that you can ask your loved one and just say, how is that going for you? Are you having more difficulties, or is that working better for you? And just kind of learning, I think learning and exploring more from their perspective. What's working out? And if they're not sharing that with you, perhaps you have an opportunity to accompany them to a doctor's appointment and make sure that perhaps you are on the HIPAA authorization at that doctor's office so that you can receive information about the doctor's visit from their providers. And that gives you a little more context too. Sometimes in this organization, I know that we have some home care providers, and those people are great eyes and ears, because these may be people who see your loved one a little more frequently, especially if you're from out of town and you don't see your loved one nearly as much as you'd like. Those people who are in the home a little more frequently can be great eyes and ears, and sometimes they are a great sounding board to confirm some of the concerns you may have for health or their abilities at home. And they may be part of that trusted network of people that you can rely on to at least get some guidance or further thought and feedback as you're having that conversation with your loved one. And that's, as far as health decisions go, things are still very private, but I think starting that open dialogue with your loved one and just saying, I'm concerned, or I would like to be more active if you would allow me to. Those are showing that you want to be involved in their life to the extent that you can, and to the extent they want you to be. Some other difficult topics also are legal. So having powers of attorney in place are so helpful in you all being able to help your folks or help your loved ones navigate things health-wise or financially. And that's where sometimes you're not even in a position to know whether one exists, much less is there a will or other plan in place. And so those are kinds of questions that can be very difficult to initiate. And I think they're worthy conversations to have and questions to ask. But honestly, that's when sometimes people are very private. Older generations still tend to be very private about their personal needs or their legal documents, and they'll say, oh, we've got a plan in place, and when it needs to happen, you'll know about it. But I think the real question is, well, who's going to tell me what that plan is when something happens? And especially if you are one of the actors in that plan, you need to know what that plan is so that you know what your role is. And so being able to ask further, that part of the legal conversation, that topic, is very hard because it's private. You aren't really entitled to know anything about their estate plan. It would be helpful if you can, though, and that's part of your conversation with your loved one, is to say, if you have a plan in place, I'd like to know who is part of that plan so that we can help you. So that if it's my sibling who is the power of attorney agent, so that they can help you better. I would like to understand what your plans are, so that we can make sure that your needs are met. And so I think this conversation can be a very difficult conversation in showing that you want to understand what exists out there, what documents exist out there. But sometimes people, parents especially, who may have more than one child, they will say, oh, well, your brother's in charge, or your sister's in charge. And they just don't want to share anything more about that. And that's hurtful for you, but in the event that, well, at least you know the plan, But I think that's also good for you to know that there is a plan and you aren't the one who has to be responsible. And maybe it's a little bit of a burden off your shoulders that you aren't the one who has to implement that. And that's where that conversation can be difficult. There are many, many different kinds of personalities in families. And often when I work with families, there's the take charge person. And that's the person who always wants to do it this way. And they're the one who's appointed to do it, so they're going to do it that way. And they're not willing to accept help from other people. And if that's not you in that role, that's going to be somebody that you might encounter. And understanding that that's the person who your parents have appointed to that role. Understanding it is their plan. And whether you agree with their plan or not is a whole other ball of wax. I think your questions to know what the plan is and whether one even exists are legitimate questions in trying to help your loved one. But in terms of, I don't like your plan, mom or dad, or I don't like this plan, sister or brother, that's a different kind of conversation. And I think internally you have to think about why do you not like that plan? Is it because you're not the one in charge? Is it because you think there could be difficulties in achieving that person's care? And so I think some of this is an inward conversation with yourself. What is it about this plan that I don't like? And that doesn't necessarily have to be communicated with your loved one because they may not want to know that you like or dislike their plan. It is their plan. A lot of times at this time of year, my office is also getting phone calls from people who are saying, oh boy, mom or dad had a fall and we went looking for that healthcare power of attorney on their way to the hospital. And what we realized is that all of their documents are 40 years old and they were from a whole other state. And so that's a lot of the conversations that this time of year people are now experiencing. Oh, they did have that conversation. It was on the way to the ER. There is a plan in place. All the people who are appointed in these roles were former neighbors for 40 years ago or siblings who are also in the same boat. And so the plan isn't working anymore. And so encouraging your family member or your loved one to update that plan or at least have it reviewed to make sure that it is a viable plan. That's where those are kinds of considerations and conversations that you could have. Just say, hey, it's been a while since you've had these documents updated, or where do you keep copies of these documents? Does anybody have a copy out there? Because I just got 2 phone calls today from a family. They think that we did a will for somebody. They don't even know if we prepared it for them. And they can't find a copy even if we did. And so this is where making sure people have the plan is important. Making sure people who are in charge have copies of that plan. But that's where even if you have those copies and you know where the plan is, encouraging someone to have them reviewed. If you've got a changed circumstances, if you are new to a new state, if there's been a birth, death, divorce, marriage, those are reasons to have a plan updated or at least reviewed to make sure that it still meets somebody's needs. If people have moved in and out of your lives, or if there are a change in circumstances in health in particular or financial circumstances, those are reasons to have, legitimate reasons to have a plan reviewed. And that can be folded into your conversation as you're asking about the legal documents. Where are they? Do you have copies? Even if you don't see them right now, just say, you may not want to talk about that with me, but I think it would be helpful if people knew where you keep these so that if we needed them, we can get them. And by the way, how old are they? Have you had them reviewed more recently? That's a great way to facilitate that conversation in order to get some of the responses, at least to learn a little more about, is there a plan and what is that plan and who's in charge? Because that's going to be helpful for your loved one to understand that their plan can still be achieved. but making sure that everyone knows where those documents are, making sure that your doctors or their doctors have copies of healthcare powers of attorney, or their financial advisor does. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if it's the proper legal term, but is there a statute of limitations on these documents? Like if they were signed 25 years ago, or how does that work?
That's a great question. So in essence, you're asking, do the documents ever expire? And I can't speak for every single document out there. If the document itself, like a power of attorney or a will or some other document, legal document, in its own language says this only expires upon this condition or this date, then that would be true. They would expire, or this limitations period, they're no longer valid. But by and large, when there's no language like that within the document, that would be most of the time with most of the documents I've seen, they don't expire. They sometimes become stale, as in the plan no longer fits the circumstances, but they don't expire. So they still may be valid documents, but fulfilling all those duties within those documents may become more difficult because of a change in time or a change in circumstances. But otherwise, I think those are just very hard conversations. And one of the things I also receive in phone calls at my office are panic calls from family members who, I want to get mom or dad into your office right away. They need to make out a will or trust or power of attorney, and they need to appoint me in these roles. We need it right away. And those are the calls we get from pretty much Thanksgiving till New Year's. And I'm only in town for this week. Do you get these calls, Amy? I'm only in town this week, and it has to be done right away. And what that's telling me is a few things. A, the person calling is not my client or potential client. The person calling is someone who may have an interest in the person who would be a potential client. And that's helpful that they care, but legally speaking, my ethical duties are to my clients once I speak with them. So a lot of times those conversations go something like this between my staff and the caller. Okay, tell me a little bit about what's going on with mom or dad. What are the circumstances? What's precipitating the need, your perception for them to update these documents? And ultimately, it will end with us telling them, we'd really like to meet with your mom, your dad. Have them call us to schedule that appointment. Because we can't ethically make out legal documents for someone else at this person's request. So having a fuller meeting where we can have that face-to-face meeting with the loved one, our client, and actually have those questions answered from the loved one. Who do you want in this plan? And it may not be the person who is called. A lot of times, different family members like to shop their loved ones to different attorneys. There's litigation that I'm aware of more recently where one daughter wants mom to come to this attorney and she does documents, and then a different daughter or son takes mom to that attorney, and they just go back and forth executing new documents that cancel each other out. That's not fair. It's not fair to mom. And it tells me that there are a lot of competing interests going on. And that is not any work that we're a part of, but I know that it happens, and I know Amy probably sees that as well. Yes, Jen?
What do you do if you encounter a situation where you suspect there might be some cognitive impairment with mom and she's being dragged around?
So that's a great question. So in this scenario Jen has proposed, there may be a concern for some cognitive impairment, some cognitive decline. Perhaps there are people who are taking advantage of that situation and shopping mom to different attorneys to have different documents done in place. Legally speaking, if someone has not been deemed legally incompetent, they are welcome to make out their own estate plan. And so that's where the gray areas start to become grayer, because and it becomes incumbent on attorneys' offices to really do their due diligence and be very straightforward ethically with who their client is. So when we have these calls from kids who may be well-intentioned, we usually will try and say from the beginning, our potential client will be mom. We will have to meet with mom privately. And that's where we'll talk with mom in depth, really try and get the full story. We like to understand from her what her assets are, who the people in her life are. And that's when you can usually understand based on the context of the whole event. Did this person fill out our forms correctly? Did they make their own appointment? Did they appear at the right time and place? Did they drive themselves? Those are all little things that we start to think of and look at in the totality of circumstances. Are they able to tell us things really easily? Or are they struggling with people's names or the relationships? That's where we start to use our own judgment. Sometimes if there's a real question, I start to say, maybe we should talk to your doctor before we move forward. And then other times, just ethically, I just feel like I can't move forward. I don't feel like we can work together. Maybe there's another day, though, that works better. Maybe they're better at a different time of day. And so working with them, if they want to be there, that's when you can work with them and try and find the right circumstances in a compassionate way that allows them the freedom to be clearer. So if they work better in the mornings, that's great. Let's have a morning meeting. If a Monday is a good time because you're following a weekend of being well rested, that's great. But if afternoons are horrible, so I think some of that is working with your client, but ethically, attorneys shouldn't be preparing documents for anybody who isn't capable of executing them or understanding them. And that becomes a problem when you've got kids who are shopping people around. Part of the process too is, at least in our office, we won't do documents same day, period. Like we don't do rush jobs. We're not going to do that on the same day. And part of it is because I don't think we can understand the full breadth of the process in a short meeting or a short time frame. And so we don't do same day documents just for that whole reason. And I think that helps eliminate people just shopping around to get the commodity or the document, as opposed to taking in the process and being able to understand what actually is going on here. Ethically, we don't communicate with the kids at all about estate planning. We will not take their input on anybody's estate plan or who should be in charge. We always just say we'd rather speak with your mom or dad. And if I have an older person who may be in their 90s, I'm always highly suspect when I get an email from that person. Because most of my elder clients in their 90s aren't emailing. So if you're getting a very well-written, lengthy email about all the changes to their estate plan, it kind of makes you wonder. And so I think at least attorneys' offices are aware of some of the concerns of ethical issues that arise. And we try and mitigate those as best we can within our setting by having face-to-face meetings outside of the presence of other people.
Thank you.
Yeah. But those are hard situations, because that's where the rubber will meet the road at some point. And so far what we've talked about is everyone's in agreement. We've got my siblings over here, we're talking to mom and dad, and now we're getting all the information about their care and their legal documents, and it's all going great and everyone's in agreement. What if you've got the black sheep in the family who's not in agreement? And that black sheep may or may not be the one in charge, but it doesn't mean they're not going to be a squeaky wheel at some point. And whether that's now in saying, oh, mom's fine, because I had that in my own family, where one person felt like, oh, this person is fine. You all are so worried about their dementia, but they're fine. Or you've got somebody who later will say, I knew it. You all should have done it this way, and I'm going to sue you. So there's lots of different kinds of personalities out there, and sometimes we're related to them. And so understanding the context and the players can be helpful. And sometimes you can't control who ultimately is appointed to these roles. And that's where having more of a mediated consultation can be easier. Maybe not cheaper, but it can be easier because our goal is to make, if everyone had the same common goal, a true common goal, the care of this person, of your loved one, it shouldn't matter who's right. It really should just matter what's right. And if everyone could agree on that, that would be great. Even that can be a topic that people disagree on. But that's where, if it becomes an issue where people are really testy with each other about what's right, there's lots of options. None of them are easy or good options, but perhaps you can enlist attorneys to help facilitate a more guided approach. Maybe you have a plan in place that everyone can agree to. Ultimately, guardianship may be an issue if no one can agree, and perhaps there's some fear of being susceptible or manipulated or harmed by somebody's actions. So there are legal options available. These aren't palatable options. These are truly, in my mind, would be last resorts, but those are still options too. But attorneys can help facilitate and guide some of these conversations, particularly when you have strong personalities involved. And I think just choosing the right mediator, whether that's an attorney or sometimes a pastor is willing to serve in that role. If they have a relationship with your loved one, they perhaps will be able to facilitate that. Therapists can also serve an important role in this. And I think, going back to the what's right, not who's right, I think everyone should have the goal to make sure that person, your loved one's care needs are met, and that you all are providing them as best you can without causing further stress. I kind of want to open it up a little bit to some questions that you all have. I know you said you would come with some questions. Are these related to the topic or
Not really.
Okay. And there's no pressure either.
No, I mean, I'll ask it anyway, but, this is probably more for a psychologist or whatever,
Okay.
but, I'm getting ready. I live with my 89-year-old mother. She's full-blown Alzheimer's. And I'm getting ready. I've got to hire somebody to come in and help me
Okay.
so I can at least go buy groceries. And my question is, how do you tell her that?
Oh, so the question for those of you at home, if you didn't hear, she's a caregiver for her 89-year-old mother, and she would like a life outside of caregiving, even if it's just to go to get groceries. And how do you have that conversation with your mom? It's hard because your mom is used to seeing you every day.
Mm-hmm.
She's used to you being there for her, and she's lucky that you are, and you're not going to get the thanks that you deserve for that. But even just doing the mundane and getting out, that's going to be
Well, just
hard.
being here tonight.
Yeah, just being here tonight can be hard. And so if you have someone who comes and sits with her, she's going to say, well, why can't you stay here with me?
Or why do I need somebody?
Or why do I need somebody? And that's a hard conversation to have depending on her cognitive abilities. Because if she were completely rational and understanding, she would say, go have your life. Go. You wouldn't even choose to be here, I'm sure. If you really wanted to have a fun time, you wouldn't be here. You would be out and not even grocery shopping. But I think explaining to her in a way that she can understand and just say, oh, I'm about to go learn some new things about, how to stay at home, how to be safe at home. Sometimes people relate just to themselves and say, I feel like I'm having some problems remembering something, and I would like to go learn more about that. And they make it a little more centered on their own needs as a way to relate to the person that they love who really has the needs, and just say, hey, see what I'm doing? I'm doing this to make myself feel better about understanding this concern that I have. And I think that's where everyone's going to be so different. There isn't going to be a right answer in your situation, but understanding the personalities involved, understanding the whys. They're going to ask why, and I think sometimes you can just say, I worry so much about you. Sometimes I just want to make sure that you're going to feel safe. And then sometimes you can be brutally honest and just say, I'm so worried that you're going to walk right out the door and I won't be able to find you. And those are hard truths that they may refute. But I think the ability to level with them in a way that you do understand, they might understand that you're at least coming from a place of care. They may not like it.
Or if she remembers the answer the next day.
Correct. And she may not even remember you were gone. So, but that doesn't make it any easier on you and your own conscience and your guilt. But I think having that conversation is difficult in understanding her personality. I never advocate for lying to people either. But sometimes people have resorted to that, and that is what can make the situation easier. Oh, I'm just gonna go run out for a couple minutes and get something. And whether you're gone for 2 hours or not, you probably need that sanity to go get groceries if that's your only time saver.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question. I'm a former nurse, but have gotten into doing some in-home care work with elderly, and some of them have had issues with dementia. And one thing that makes me very uncomfortable is taking them to a medical office. And, you know, at one place they wanted this person that obviously wasn't mentally capable to sign informed consent.
Oh, that's
And
interesting.
I am not comfortable with that. Now, that daughter ended up coming,
Mm-hmm.
but do you have any counsel for hired caregivers on how to maybe navigate? And I'm finding, you know, I had some legal training in my nursing program, but informed consent, it just seems crazy. It's not even informed consent. Here, sign this. Informed consent means you've been informed of the risks, the benefits, possible things that could happen with that particular surgery or procedure or vaccine. But it just seems like all hands off in the medical arena of really educating people properly regarding informed consent.
So that is a broad topic. If you didn't catch that at home, the question surrounds caregivers who are actually nurse assistants or nursing aides or nurses who are providing care to a client in a home setting, not so much a family relationship. But within that care setting, when those people are taking someone to a doctor's appointment and there's obvious mental decline or cognitive decline, and the medical providers are saying, hey, sign this informed consent. What kind of legal counsel I can offer in-home care providers about the extent of that informed consent when it may not be as apparent that the person is truly informed or possibly not even consenting. But I think that's where you're in a difficult position because you are being hired as a caregiver. You are a health care agent for that person. To some degree, I don't know if you would be advocating for that person, but I think it tells me about your true professionalism that you're recognizing what they're being asked to do and provide or at least acknowledge on a form their informed consent probably isn't, they're not capable of providing
And
that.
it's just not done. I mean, it seems to me in the medical arena, it's just sign this form where the doctor or PA or whatever really is not doing that due diligence with regards to explaining the procedure. And that's just what I've seen.
I can't speak to any one particular instance, but I think in your role, you aren't a health care agent, so there may not be much you can do aside from the providers who are asking for the signed signature. I think it's probably reflective of our society where they are going through the motions and getting the signature here. This is all for the paperwork there. We've had this conversation, check. Whether that's appropriate or not, I don't feel comfortable weighing in on it, but I think what you're experiencing or what you have witnessed, probably you're right, isn't truly the breadth of informed consent. what I might suggest is having that conversation with the healthcare agent, the family member who may be an advocate for that person, your client, and just say, hey, they asked for the signature on all this stuff, and I just feel like they was probably a little over their head. They may not have understood. But even ethically, do you have an obligation to share that with your client or to speak to their health agent? But I think sharing your concerns with those who are in charge of health is probably the best thing you can do. I just think you're in a precarious position. If that person had signed some informed consent to forgo surgery for some reason, that may be a bigger conversation that their family members need to be aware
It
of.
hasn't been that extreme, but just, consent and, different things that, I just take all that seriously, but it just seems
Yeah.
like people don't anymore.
Well, and I would agree with you. It is, I mean, my firm handles a lot of medical work, and so I agree with you. It is serious, and it shouldn't be something that's given short shrift. However, what you are able to do in your position is probably just share your concerns with the healthcare agent. If you feel that the client that you're serving isn't capable of engaging in that conversation about your concerns, then finding the healthcare agent.
Just curious, so, I'm a care manager, so advocate for people, and I'm not healthcare power of attorney. Would I be out of line, like the other guest asked, to ask the provider, actually, before she signs that, could you go through with us here, with her, what the information is? She's not informed yet, so she can't consent.
I think that's a fair question to ask the provider whether they'll make the time to do that, especially when you're not the client or the patient in that setting. But I think it would be a kind way of pointing out to the provider that there hasn't been a fuller discussion of being informed before they can consent. And hopefully that provider would also have picked up or at least been somewhat aware of the diminished capacity or the cognitive decline before they launched into that. But I think that's probably more replicative of your experiences where we're going through the motion, we're going to have this form done, we're going to have this form done. So I think that's a kind way of giving the provider some benefit of the doubt and just saying, can you be fuller in your explanation about this? And what you're seeking.
Sometimes it's not the provider, it's the nurse or medical assistant who's asking for the signature.
Did you have a question?
Yeah,
Oh, good. Okay.
What are your thoughts on online documents? So utilizing online legal
Oh, yeah.
healthcare so I feel like a lot of people are doing that as long as they have a notary and two witnesses versus having a legal document drawn up by.
So that's a great question. So for those of you at home, the question is talking about online documents. And essentially, I call them do-it-yourself documents because people have their own ideas of, oh, I can do that. So as an attorney, I think they are great for my business. And I say that simply because people don't know what they don't know. And I say that because I read a lot of people's do-it-yourself documents and they come in and they shove it across the table and they say, oh, we did this ourselves during COVID. We just wanted to protect each other. And that's when it all unravels. So even well-educated people who think they know exactly what they're doing, these are all real-life examples. Husband and wife forgot to name each other as executors. They named their oldest child. Because in their minds, oh, we're both dead. We both died in that car accident. So they didn't name it. So they all, and all of the clients I meet with have this view that they're both going to die at the same time. And I can tell you in the years of practice I've had, that has rarely happened. So this is one example. They both failed to name husband and wife, spouses as executors. They just skipped each other and went straight to their oldest child. I've had a situation where a husband and wife forgot to leave each other the things. They just skipped over it and gave it to their kids. That was not part of the plan. They thought they did it correctly. They meant to leave it to each other, but they're like, oh, I didn't realize it didn't do that. Other things, I had a client use a spouse as a witness, which under North Carolina law would invalidate your spouse's share. And I won't even go into people who think they're going to do it correctly for their kids and hold things in trust for their kids, or there's a myriad of bad ideas that go into do-it-yourself documents. And that's not to say that people don't try very hard or don't get it right. Sometimes people get it right, and sometimes these do-it-yourself documents are just fine. That doesn't mean that there aren't ways to improve upon it, but I think that's where you have to have an understanding of how things are intended to be passed under North Carolina law or whatever state laws where you live. And so people don't always come informed about the things that they own or how those assets will pass. They'll say, oh, my will's going to pass everything, when that's not what it does at all. They've named kids on their bank accounts with them, so those accounts aren't even going to be touched by a will. So that's where having legal guidance is helpful. And that's not even to say that if they got it right, if they use LegalZoom, or their situation is so easy that an online system was fine. I think the problems then become witnessing or notarizing these documents appropriately, which can make for some big problems if they aren't executed. They may not be valid documents, even though they have people present, or they just may not do it correctly. And so I think there's just a lot to be said for do-it-yourself documents. Because the hard part is you're not going to find out until it's either too late and you're not here to rectify it, or these documents like a POA for health or for finance are now going to be used and they're rejected for whatever reason. Healthcare POAs, you can't have family members or healthcare providers be witnesses. And so I think that's where you don't really want to test whether it's going to be valid under an urgent set of circumstances when you can't otherwise fix that situation. So I am a big fan of legal documents that people do themselves, because it just makes for good business for me, whether we're correcting them now or we're litigating them later. But that's not to say that there could be a time and a place for them. And I won't say never, that these are never good, but I think you have to be very careful in doing them and truly understand what you're doing, and be willing to take a risk if you're okay with that. And that's where I think most attorneys are willing to review documents as part of their consultation, just to get a good idea. Is this okay? Is this a good document for me?
So our family had that, my parents are in Georgia, I'm in North Carolina, my brother's in Alabama. So we arranged a couple summers ago to meet with an elder care attorney. And so my parents were there, my brother and I were there. And then, they said anyone else could attend by Zoom, if they needed to. But at that point, we were planning to move my parents from Georgia to Alabama, where my brother was. And so they did a great job, for the fee of looking at all the documents my mom had. And they had sent us a bunch of forms, where she basically had to disclose like all their financial stuff and long-term care. And so it was really great to kind of get there. And then they said, should you decide to stay in the state, we can put this, consultation fee for updating your documents, which that's kind of where we're at now. They, because of my dad's memory issues, it was better to kind of keep him in his environment. But the person who had referred us to this attorney had some issues later when they went back to try to have some stuff done. Now, I don't understand, because I know this person very well. I'm not really sure, but because my mom heard that, and she heard like they were trying to charge her all this money, and this was the daughter. Now, because we need to go back and get those documents updated, what can I do to help my mother feel that whoever they're choosing as their elder care attorney, that they, it's a trust thing, right? Like, they met with them, everything was great. Now they've heard from our family friend that they feel like they got taken advantage of, and they want all this money to do, X, Y, Z. So you know, from a professional standpoint, when we are out there trying to find, you know, the right legal counsel, what are kind of some guidelines?
So that's a great situation. Well, that's not a great situation, but it's a great example. And for those of you at home, the scenario described is we've got lots of family members and kids from different states. Mom and dad is in another state, and everyone had worked with an attorney to at least have a consultation and review. The attorney made a proposal to say, this is how we propose moving forward if you wish to. Your mom and dad wanted to move forward and maybe got that ball rolling and then got cold feet because they heard someone else had a bad experience, and now everything's just sort of stagnant. Did I describe that pretty carefully?
Because they're like, well, because they heard the money part, right? And, you know, there's a pretty fixed income for most people in that. And so they thought, well, I don't want them to be telling us that we're fine and suddenly we need something and they're telling us that we need to pay them $15,000, you know, for that documentation. So
having the conversation where as part of the cold feet, mom and dad are maybe fearful of the cost now, maybe just concerned about what this is going to do for them. What do you all as family members, how can you help them? I think for one, I don't think a second opinion is a bad idea in this case. And I think if they're being asked to pay what feels like a lot of money, I think sometimes getting a second opinion from someone in the same specialty area or same practice area can be helpful in saying, yeah, this is the kind of plan I would do, and give them an idea of the general costs. They can compare. And I think the hard part for some people might be comparing apples and oranges. So I say sometimes real estate attorneys will often prepare a power of attorney or will for their clients when the client has purchased a piece of property. And that's not to say that the plan is bad. It just happens to be that was something the real estate attorney prepared as part of their services. Elder law attorneys, estate planning attorneys are probably going to do a little bit of a different job, maybe a more thorough job. That's not to say that it's better, but it's probably going to be more thorough because that's their practice area. So when you are getting a second opinion, make sure that you are working with someone within the same practice experience, that you're not just going to some other person who prepares POAs as part of their practice or someone who dabbles in that area. But make sure you're getting a good informed decision from a second opinion. And I think to the extent that you share that with the second opinion attorney and say, we've already met with someone and this is what they proposed and they want X, Y, and Z. We want to get another opinion on that. Sometimes that's helpful. Sometimes people come in blind and say, and they just really want to hear for themselves, what is your plan and what would that cost? Sometimes that's helpful in setting expectations, both for the whole family, but especially for your folks, because that is a lot of money. Whatever they're paying for their plan, they want to get peace of mind out of that. And sometimes that peace of mind might be entirely worth it to them, but you're right, if they're on a fixed income, they want to make sure that the plan is going to fit their needs, not just maybe cure some peace of mind down the road. So I don't think a second opinion is warranted, but I also think it's worth them meeting with the attorney and saying, you know, we started this process. I've got some concerns about the costs, and that's the hard part. Older folks may not want to advocate as much. And that's where ethically I may not want to hear from you kids, what you all, you speaking on mom and dad's behalf, but perhaps since you all have had a family meeting before with that attorney, that maybe your parents have given permission for you to speak with them. I would always include your parents as much as you can when you are speaking with their attorney, and know that that attorney represents their interests. But I think it may be worthwhile just to say mom and dad have gotten some cold feet. They've got some concerns about the costs. Can you have a conversation with them even?
I was very impressed with how they conducted the meeting. And he said, look, should you stay in state, and these are the documents that you do need to have updated, we would put this toward that. So there was no issue from that part. It was that this family friend who had recommended this elder care attorney to us had then needed some other legal help and felt like it was a surprise that, you know, wasn't informed. But my parents aren't in that situation because they have 8 years of long-term care, and he already reviewed that policy. So I think it's just more of that, oh my gosh, that can happen to us, you know, because you don't know what you don't know. And
Yeah.
it's just, you know, I'm trusting, right? That we're providing all the information that we know to provide based on what's been requested.
Sure.
And I felt like the meeting was great. It was very informative. It gave us all the information and feedback that we needed, and was not trying to take advantage or do more. But again, I think there's that level of trust concern, right? Because my dad's calling my brother by my godfather's name the whole time in the meeting.
Oh, no.
And we're like, you know, so there's all these things going on. And, you know, we're trying to, you know, stay focused on things. But, you know, my thought is that we should have a, you know, second meeting once, you know, we'll review the plan, but what were those documents? And let's, you know, whoever you decide to use, you know, let's move forward with that so you can get those documents.
Or encourage your parents to meet with the attorney again, and just for them to be able to voice their concerns with the attorney, with or without you kids. I think it's almost always helpful for me as a legal professional to hear directly from my client what their concerns are versus a kid saying, Mom or Dad is upset about X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, and I don't do that. I mean, I just, because my mom's exhausted. She's the sole caregiver of my dad, who has dementia and Alzheimer's. So she kind of needs to know his ears. And, you know, I do what she invites me to do. But, you know, for her, it's just so overwhelming. And we're in Atlanta, so the drive to where this office is not good. So I think, and part of it is she would rather just have someone who's more coordinated to work with.
So I think that might be worthwhile in the second opinion, finding someone who's more local to them. I think it might be worthwhile, whoever they work with, find out if that person will travel to their home. If your mom's really up to here with caregiving, the idea of getting out of the house, as you know, is difficult enough. And so asking if someone will travel to you, I think there's a cost for everything. But that may be worthwhile and worth her sanity, so she doesn't have to get in the car and go find somebody. I think that can help form a better opinion about whoever she works with.
I didn't even know to even think to ask.
Yeah, I think it's worth asking. I know for me, when people ask for me to travel to them, we charge a travel fee for that. And it usually becomes a little bit harder to fit into a day. So, but I think everyone can work to find something.
I don't know if I've asked too many questions,
You're
but
fine.
in truth, my sister and I are involved with possible guardianship with my father, who's in hospital in Illinois. We just were out there at Thanksgiving. And we did see an attorney, and we really liked him, and he was older, but, you know, there were some questions about guardianship, and I know we're in the state of North Carolina and not Illinois where my father is, but can there be two guardians? Like, you know, my sister and I, can we put on that legal document as both guardians for my father, or usually is it just one?
So the question is really, within a context of guardianship, the question is, can you have more than one guardian? And I think before I answer that question, when you said referring to a document, I want to make sure, are we talking about a court-appointed guardian where there's a process that you're having your dad declared incompetent, and having you and your sister? Okay, so we are using the same words. So within that setting of a guardianship, that court-appointed setting, ultimately that will be up and dictated by the Illinois courts where the guardianship that would be initiated is not here. I can speak in general terms here in North Carolina. Yes, you can have co-guardians. Sometimes, practically speaking, it can be difficult to have two people in the same role to make the same choices. I mean, even when you've got people who agree on everything, there's always going to be some little difference of opinion. But if you assume that you and your sister get along and that you are both invested in doing what's right for dad, Sometimes being appointed co-guardians can be a good thing. Maybe a little difficult if you both have to sign things and send it off to the court.
I was wondering how laborious that was.
Yeah.
I did a lot with our mother, and, I kind of stepped to the side, and she had a better relationship with my dad because she was seeing him more frequently. So I think there's more trust for him with her, and he's had long-standing severe mental health issues. I'm not going to get into all of that, but we visited this lawyer, and he said, well, your dad will be served a paper legally, and we do care about him deeply, and we don't want him to feel betrayed. And we want to be able to work with him effectively. And yet he has money that we need to access to pay for his care. So we feel like we're over a barrel.
You've described the very difficult circumstances that most families experience in a guardianship setting. That someone has some immediate needs that can't be met because they don't have the proper paperwork to access funds for them, or and it starts to become difficult. And then you add the legal process involved. It isn't a smooth process, but I think one example to think about, and this is again based in North Carolina and some of the rules here in North Carolina, but I would like to envision that the states aren't too different. If one of you has that better relationship, if your sister has that better relationship, or if she's closer with him proximity-wise, she may be a great person to be appointed here in North Carolina. We call it guardian of the person, so that she gets to help him with health choices and life and safety choices. And perhaps there is a different person. It could be a different person, or it could be the same, someone who is guardian of the estate, who handles the assets. And those two people are really tasked with working together within their respective roles. And that is a different way of appointing two people to different positions to still serve the same person without being co-guardians for the same job. And that's something to think about with the attorney and what to ask. That would also be something to explore within the court. I don't know if there's a guardian ad litem appointed in Illinois throughout that process. Here in North Carolina, it is. But having those conversations with everyone involved in the guardianship and maybe making one of those proposals is a good option.
So you mean the court typically assigns the legal responsibility for an independent person to be working with the guardians on behalf of this person?
Well, here in North Carolina, and I don't know if Illinois is different at all. Here in North Carolina, within a guardianship setting, through that legal process, once your dad would be served with notice of that guardianship, or at least the petition to have him appointed incompetent and have a guardian appointed, the court also appoints what we call a guardian ad litem, who is, in our case here locally, is an attorney. Usually they're family law attorneys or elder law attorneys who are appointed by the court to meet and investigate your dad's needs and present those to the court to the best that they can understand them. It's not always in line with what your goals are for your dad, but it's sort of an independent person who can verify what your dad may have told them or otherwise figure out whether guardianship is needed.
Yeah, his doctor has, filled out the appropriate paperwork, and I thought there was two doctors required, but out in Illinois, it was only one doctor required to declare that he's not capable to handle his really anything, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So that was helpful. Anything else that comes to your mind that you might counsel me about regarding this guardianship?
Because it's Illinois, I don't feel like I'm equipped to really guide you well in Illinois law, but I would express my condolences that that's where you are with your sister and your dad, because that's a difficult process. And even in the best of situations, it's just hard to go through that, or to see your dad have to, the indignity of having your dad deemed incompetent. That's hard. Hard for you all, and to the extent he's aware of it, that's hard on him.
And we really do want him to get the care that he needs.
Right.
And because of his mental status, he's not recognizing some real safety issues and concerns, and
Yeah.
anyway, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Do we have any other questions? No? Well, I appreciate you all coming, and thank you for joining us online virtually, and I'm happy that you all invited me. I really appreciate it. Thank
You'll have a stack of papers on your desk, or your tables. So these are all for Cranfield Sumner. So if you need some more information, it's there. And then she also had this information and evaluation sheet that's at the very bottom. I know you always have one that you fill out for us on the programs. If you can also fill this out for her, and that way they can just know what information is helpful for future programs. It also gives you a chance to let her know if you're interested in a complimentary consultation, and also some other brochures and guides that are not necessarily here. Is that correct?
That's right.
That they can get to you as well. So if you can fill out that and the ACAP program feedback that you're used to. And then I'm going to highlight both of our next two programs. The January 9th one you have the flyer for, and that one's going to be on caregiving for your parents from a distance. And I heard a number of you that are caregiving for people in other states. So that one's going to speak directly to that. And that's Jennifer Sherman from Brunswick Senior Resources. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you about the February one, because that one's on shielding loved ones from scams and frauds. And that's a great topic for people that may not be in that caregiving role yet, because this applies to everyone, and trying to protect yourself and your senior loved ones, your parents, from those situations, since that might help get them coming to events like this and learning some of the things in advance. I know your question about, how do you have a conversation with a parent about when care is needed, and we opened up about some of the conversations about wills and trusts. It's so important to start having those conversations a lot of times much earlier than we feel like it's needed, because we just get used to the idea of something. So that's what I would just really encourage you, even if something's not a topic you feel like is in the immediate future, start having those conversations. If it's a parent that may eventually need to move to a community or bring in home care, just start asking them, what would you like as you maybe need extra help? So that you just get used to having those conversations. You get them used to maybe thinking about the ideas or having their ears open to what other people are doing. That can just be a help. And I'm sure same thing with wills and trusts, that if they're not ready for it right away, but the more you kind of hear that conversation, I don't know if you're familiar with hospice, it talks about begin the conversation, and just, especially with these things that are tough conversations, the earlier we have them, the more we get people just used to them, can be helpful. So I think, let me see if I'm leaving anything else out. I think that's everything. So we will look forward to seeing you all in 2024 for our next program. Have a very Merry Christmas. And we do have resources up there. If there's any other questions you have, since we are a little bit earlier, feel free to stay and ask Attorney Kara Gansman or any of us. And thank you so much. Thank you again to our presenter. We appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us on the streaming audience.